Last night, you used your phone to watch a keynote. It took photos, ran your apps, held a charge, did everything you've ever asked of it. You were happy with it. Then a man on a stage held up a slightly different phone, and somewhere in the next hour, without a single thing changing about the device in your hand, yours started to feel old. That's the whole trick right there. Nothing happened to your phone. Something happened to how you see your phone. 24 hours earlier, you were satisfied, and now you're not. And the only thing that changed is that a newer version exists in the world. That flicker of dissatisfaction you felt? It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't really yours. A company spent an enormous amount of money to put it in your head, right on schedule, the same way they do it every year. I want to talk about that today because it's one of the quietest and most expensive habits in modern life, and almost nobody adds up what it actually costs them. Not the price of any one phone, the lifetime total of buying the same device over and over, each time convinced that what you had was suddenly not enough. It runs into 6 figures over a working life, and the wild part is you were never even upgrading for the device. You were upgrading to make a feeling go away. So let me show you how the feeling gets manufactured, what it really costs, and, honestly, when upgrading is actually worth it, because sometimes it is. Start with the psychology, because the whole machine runs on it. There's a well-worn idea in behavioral science about how humans adjust to anything good remarkably fast. Get the new car, the new house, the new phone, and within a few weeks, the thrill fades and the new thing just becomes the baseline. Your brain resets to neutral and starts looking for the next bump. With a phone, that thrill has a shockingly short shelf life. The excitement of a new one lasts, a few days? You spend a weekend moving your data over and admiring how it looks almost exactly like the last one. By the following week, it feels completely normal, indistinguishable from the phone you were perfectly happy with before. So sit with the actual timeline. The excitement lasts about 72 hours. The payment plan lasts 24 months. You get 3 days of feeling ahead in exchange for 2 years of financing a device that, in daily use, does nothing your old one couldn't. And then, right about the time you've fully adjusted and the newness has worn off, the cycle starts again, and a new model appears to remind you that you're behind once more. Here's the part worth being honest with yourself about. The dissatisfaction didn't come from inside you. You didn't wake up one morning independently deciding your phone was inadequate. You watched a keynote, or an ad, or a review, and the discontent was installed from the outside. That's not a moral failing. It's a very expensive feeling that someone else engineered and then sold back to you as your own desire. Let me put real money on this, and I'm going to use honest numbers, not the scary inflated ones you'll see elsewhere. You'll hear people claim the average American spends $850 a phone. That's the average sale price, skewed upward by the flashiest flagships and by financing. What the typical person actually pays is closer to $630, because plenty of people buy mid-range or last year's model. And Americans now hold on to phones longer than they used to, somewhere between 2.5 and nearly 4 years, depending on whose data you trust. And that number has been stretching, not shrinking. So the picture isn't quite the doom loop some make it out to be. But it still adds up to real money, and phones are only the start. Add the laptop replaced every few years, the tablet, the smartwatch, the earbuds you replace when their glued-in battery quietly dies, and the doorbell and speaker and streaming stick besides. None of it feels like much in the moment, because each piece is a separate, small decision spread across separate months. And the accessories are the sneakiest part of the whole thing, because each one feels far too trivial to think about. What's a new pair of earbuds? What's a watch? While every one of them is quietly running on its own replacement clock, glued shut battery and all, cycling every couple of years right alongside the phone. Add them all up, and the small stuff is often a bigger yearly drain than the phone that gets all the attention. But let me show you the gap between 2 ways of living with technology. Take one person who upgrades roughly on the schedule the companies suggest. a new flagship every couple of years, a fresh laptop every 3 or 4, the watch, the earbuds, all of it. And take a second person with the exact same needs, who keeps the phone 4 years, buys refurbished when they do replace it, runs the laptop until it genuinely can't keep up, and replaces accessories only when they actually break. The first person spends somewhere around $1,300 a year on personal tech. The second spends closer to $400. The gap is about $900 a year. $900 doesn't sound like a wealth-changing number, but take that gap and invest it instead of spending it, and over 30 years at a normal market return, it grows to right around $100,000. That's the true price of the upgrade habit, not the $1,200 on any single phone, the $100,000 of compounding you quietly hand over, one imperceptible upgrade at a time, for devices that end up in a drawer with 4 of their ancestors. Open the junk drawer in most homes and you'll find that exact graveyard. 2 or 3 old phones, a pair of dead earbuds, a tablet nobody's charged in a year, a smartwatch with a swollen battery. Every single item in there worked fine the day it got replaced. That drawer is a small museum of manufactured dissatisfaction, and it cost a fortune to fill. And if this whole pattern feels familiar, it should, because it's the same one running underneath almost every money mistake I've watched people make. It's lifestyle creep wearing a tech costume, a small, recurring, barely noticed upgrade that quietly resets your baseline, so the thing that thrilled you last year is merely adequate this year, and the money disappears into a standard of living you adapted to within a month and can no longer even feel. Phones are just the version with a launch date printed on the calendar. So how do they reliably make you want it? The machinery is worth understanding, because once you see it, you stop feeling it as strongly. The first piece is the release schedule itself. By launching new models on a predictable annual beat, the industry has trained a whole culture to experience its devices as aging on a clock. The phone that felt cutting edge in January feels dated by September, not because anything changed, but because a successor now exists. And the keynote isn't only selling the new phone. Every camera comparison, every benchmark, every up to 40% faster is quietly telling you that the thing in your pocket is deficient. You think you're watching a product launch. You're partly watching a very polished campaign to make you dissatisfied with something you already own. The second piece is software. Each new operating system is built for the newest hardware and asks for a little more memory, a little more processing power than the phone before it had. So your 3-year-old phone technically runs the update, but it runs it slower, with more lag, and a battery that seems to drain faster. It feels like the phone is dying. Often it isn't. And I have to be honest about the most famous example here, because the internet turned it into something it wasn't. Back in 2017, Apple was caught slowing down older iPhones through a software update, and it paid around $500 million to settle the lawsuits. Everyone took that as proof that companies deliberately cripple your phone to force you to buy a new one. But the real story is more complicated and more useful to you. Apple was throttling the processor to stop phones with old, degraded batteries from randomly shutting off. A slower phone that stays on is arguably better than a fast one that dies at 40%. The genuine scandal wasn't the throttling. It was that they did it secretly, without telling anyone or offering a choice. And the fix, for most of those people, wasn't a new phone at all. It was a battery, which Apple ended up replacing for $29. Keep that in your pocket, because it matters later. The third piece is repair, or the lack of it. Batteries get glued in, screens get fused, parts get kept away from independent shops. So when your battery finally does fade, you're quoted $80 or $90 for a repair on a 3-year-old phone, and you find yourself thinking, well, for that much I might as well put it toward a new one. That thought is not an accident. That's the exact calculation the design was meant to produce. There's a whole right to repair movement fighting over this precisely because the friction is deliberate. And the fourth piece is the one that hides the cost completely: financing. When a $1,000 phone becomes $42 a month, you never feel the $1,000. You feel the 42. The pain of the price gets sliced so thin you stop noticing it's there. And the trade-in program hands you a fraction of your old phone's real remaining value to make the swap feel free. It isn't free. It's just quiet. And wrapped around all four of those is a cultural layer you don't even register as marketing. The influencer unboxings, the review videos, the friend who casually mentions their new camera, the low hum of a sense that everyone has moved on, but you. Most of that isn't a conspiracy. It's millions of people who all absorbed the same release schedule and now reinforce it on each other for free. The company lights the fire once a year. The culture keeps it burning the other 11 months at no extra cost to them. Now, some of you are pushing back, and fairly. Technology does improve. New phones are genuinely better. Isn't upgrading rational? So let me be precise about what better means once it reaches your actual hands. A flagship from 3 years ago and a flagship from this year both do everything about 95% of people actually do with a phone: texting, calling, email, maps, social media, streaming, photos that look great on a screen. This year's model does all of it maybe 3 to 5% faster, with a camera that's slightly sharper in low light you rarely shoot in, on a screen that's a touch brighter in direct sun you're mostly not standing in. The improvements are real. They're also, in day-to-day use, almost impossible to feel. You cannot perceive a 5% speed bump when you open Instagram. You can't see the difference between the photos on a phone-sized screen. The gap that looks dramatic in a benchmark chart quietly vanishes in your hand. Which means the $1,000 mostly isn't buying you a better experience. It's buying you the knowledge that you own the newest one. That's a real feeling, and it's fine to want it, but it's worth knowing that's what you're paying for, because it's a very different thing from paying for capability you'll actually use. And it's worth understanding why the improvements shrank to almost nothing, because it tells you this won't reverse. Early on, the leaps were real. The jump from an early iPhone to the one a few years later was night and day, genuine new capability every single year. But the technology matured, the way every technology eventually does. Once a pocket computer can do everything a normal person needs, there's nowhere dramatic left to go. So the companies are left shipping smaller and smaller refinements while describing them in the same breathless language they used back when the changes actually mattered. The words stayed revolutionary. The phones stopped being. The newest version of the pitch is artificial intelligence. For the last couple of years, the whole reason to upgrade has quietly shifted to AI features: a smarter assistant, clever photo tricks, writing tools baked in. Some of it is genuinely impressive, but ask yourself honestly whether you'd reach for it every day, or whether it's the same old move in a shinier costume. A fresh reason to feel your current phone is missing something, built around a feature most people try twice and then never open again. Once in a while, the leap is real. Far more often, it's a new sticker on the same box. Here's where I part ways with the people who tell you to never buy anything ever, because that advice is just as dumb as buying everything, and it'll steer you wrong. There are real reasons to upgrade, and I won't pretend otherwise. The biggest one is security. Old phones eventually stop getting software updates, and once that happens, you're carrying around a device with known holes in it that nobody's patching, holding your email, your bank, your photos. That's a genuine risk, and when your phone hits that wall, you should replace it. But here's the good news that the panic merchants leave out. Support windows have gotten dramatically longer. Apple now supports iPhones for 5 to 7 years. Samsung and Google now promise 7 years of updates on their better phones. So the security clock that used to force a new phone every couple of years now gives you the better part of a decade. That's not a reason to upgrade more. It's permission to keep what you have far longer than you've been told. The other honest reasons are simple. A battery that won't hold a charge even after you replace it. A screen that's genuinely broken. A real specific need. You actually shoot professional photos, or you have a vision or accessibility requirement that a newer device meaningfully serves. Those are all legitimate. What's not legitimate is the calendar. It's been 2 years is not a reason. There's a new one is not a reason. And I'll give the industry this much credit because it's true and it's encouraging. The grip is loosening. People are keeping phones longer every year. Battery life, not newness, is now the top thing buyers say they care about. The market is quietly growing up, and the old annual upgrade reflex is fading on its own. You're not fighting the culture as hard as you would have been 10 years ago. You're joining a shift that's already underway. There's a quiet opportunity hiding inside all of this, and it's created by the very people upgrading too often. When someone trades in a perfectly good 2-year-old flagship because they've been convinced it's obsolete, that phone doesn't vanish. It gets tested, refurbished, and resold for something like half of what it cost new, with most of its performance intact and, thanks to those long support windows, years of security updates still ahead of it. The person who upgrades on schedule is essentially subsidizing the person who's willing to buy one generation back. A refurbished flagship from 2 years ago will do everything a brand new one does for daily life at a mid-range price with the same reliability. The stigma around buying refurbished was manufactured by companies that profit from selling new. The devices themselves are excellent. You're just letting someone else pay the newness premium and eat the depreciation for you. There's one more cost, and it isn't on your bank statement. The world generated a record 62 million tons of electronic waste in a single recent year, according to the UN, and less than a quarter of it gets properly recycled. The rest is mostly burned or buried, along with the toxic materials inside it. And most of a phone's entire lifetime carbon footprint comes not from using it, but from manufacturing it. The mining, the refining, the assembly. Which means the single most environmentally powerful thing you can do with a phone is boringly simple. Keep it longer. Stretching a phone's life by just 1 extra year cuts its lifetime emissions by roughly a third. So the person still using a 4-year-old phone isn't behind, and they're certainly not embarrassing. They're making the smarter financial call and the more responsible one at the same time. The pressure to feel otherwise was manufactured, same as everything else here. So here's the practical version, stripped of drama. Measure your device against what you actually do, not against what a newer one could theoretically do. Write down your real daily use: messages, email, photos, maps, streaming, a few apps. If your 2 or 3-year-old phone does all of that without real trouble, you don't have a phone problem. You have a marketing problem. And the cure is free. Don't watch the launch. And if the itch hits anyway, give it one simple rule. Wait 30 days. The dissatisfaction a keynote installs is at its strongest the week of the announcement, and it fades fast because it was never really yours to begin with. Most of the time, if you just refuse to act on it for a month, you'll look up and notice the phone you were about to abandon is still quietly doing everything you need, and the urge has simply evaporated. The wanting has a very short shelf life if you don't feed it in those first few days. When your phone does start to feel slow, replace the battery before you replace the phone. A battery job runs under $100 and can hand you 2 more good years. Compare that to $1,000 for a new device, and you'll see it's one of the highest return moves in your whole financial life. While you're at it, clean the thing out. Delete the apps you never open. Clear the junk. Factory reset it if it's really dragging. A huge share of "my phone got slow" is software clutter, not dying hardware. When you truly do need to replace something, buy refurbished a generation back and let someone else absorb the depreciation. And set your upgrade triggers on need, not the calendar. The security updates have actually stopped, or the battery won't hold even after replacement, or it genuinely can't run something you truly need. Those are the signals. A date on the calendar and a man on a stage are not. And then do the one thing that turns all of this from a lecture into real money. Take the difference and invest it. That $900 a year you're no longer feeding into the upgrade cycle isn't just saved. Pointed into the market and left alone, it's the $100,000 we talked about. Same person, same life. One just quietly opted out of a feeling. And I don't want you walking away thinking this was a video about gadgets, because the phone is just the clearest example of a much bigger pattern, one that's probably costing you more somewhere else. The exact same machine runs on cars, where a fresh model every year and a lease that resets every 3 keeps millions of people permanently making a payment on a depreciating thing they trade away long before it's worn out. It shows up in the accessory ecosystem: the watch, the earbuds, the tablet you were told you needed to complete the set. You'll find it in your wardrobe, your kitchen gadgets, your furniture, anything a company can attach a feeling of new to. The mechanism never changes. Manufacture a small dissatisfaction with something that still works perfectly, then sell you the cure at a markup. Once you can see it clearly on your phone, you start catching it everywhere. And every place you spot it and quietly step out of the current is one more stream of money that stops leaking towards somebody else's quarterly earnings and starts compounding toward your own future instead. So the next time your phone suddenly feels old the same week a new one appears, I want you to notice exactly what happened. Your phone didn't change. It works precisely as well as it did the night before. What changed is that a great deal of money was spent to adjust your perception of it on a schedule, because the entire business depends on you feeling behind. You are not behind. You're being told you're behind by the only people in the room who profit when you believe it. Your 3-year-old phone works. Your 5-year-old laptop works. The dissatisfaction you're feeling isn't rising up out of the device. It's being piped in from the outside, and now that you can see the pipe, it loses most of its power. Keep what works. Replace it when it's actually done, not when you're told it is. And invest the difference, because that's the part they'll never put on a keynote. I'm Gray. Money decisions made clear. I'll see you in the next one.